On a suddenly not so casual 7-point sharp Sunday, it is the Super Millions Show 2022. It is Sharky Waters Nation, 9 words of lifestyle. Ride the wave or get out of the water. It is the shark. It is the gun. Guns picks. 7. Let the music drop. Let the energy build. What's going on, my brother?
Man, having a good, absolute beautiful Sunday, man. We just cashed some tickets on college football yesterday, and I'm going to continue the momentum into the Sunday slate. Let's get into it. I'm ready. Here we go.
Turning the music off, segueing to play number 1. We are going to Cincinnati, Ohio. Guns picks. The Cincinnati Bengals find a team, an Atlanta Falcons team outside of the division, who are 6-0 ATS on the campaign. Marcus Mariota at Oregon, Chip Kelly, one thing. Arthur Smith, Atlanta, another thing. Guns picks. How is this team possibly 6-0 ATS on this campaign?
That's what I'm trying to figure out here because I don't see it. Now, you look at Atlanta right now. 6-0, red hot. You know how many teams have gotten to 7-0 to start a season? Only 4 in 40 years. I mean, it's really hard to do, and it rarely happens. And I really don't think Atlanta's going to be doing it in this one. Let me tell you why. I mean, Cincinnati is off a dramatic road win and cover versus the New Orleans Saints. Driving down, did kill my Saints play, but I digress. We don't live in the past. Minus 51 net yards for that game. On offense, they hold their opponents to 27 less yards per game, plus 79 net yards average at home. Cincinnati is definitely a home team you want to back. Now, Atlanta, they're 1-2 straight up on the road, underperform in these spots. They have a minus 90 net yard average on the road, and their opponents are plus 43 yards above their offensive season average when they go against the Atlanta Falcons on the road, and plus 72 yards better on the defensive side when they play Atlanta. So your offense and your defense outperform above your season averages when you play the Atlanta Falcons on the road. Wow. Atlanta is 6 straight covers. It's rare, like I said, to sustain this pace. Cincy's on a little bit of a cover streak too, if you want to get into that. 8-2 against the spread dating back to last season. So it's a perfect spot to be riding the Saints. It's a perfect spot to get off the Falcons train for now. We might find some better spots for them later in the season. Just not this one, my friends. I'm taking Cincinnati minus 6.5 as a 1.5 unit play for me.
Yeah, full alignment here. And as we talk about every week, Circa Millions competition, and we give a shout out to Circa out in Las Vegas. There are 5 top plays. I'm not playing all of them officially myself out of my own bankroll this week, but Cincinnati minus 6.5 is one of my official plays. And let's discuss a little bit deeper, of course, Guns, with numerous talking points there. But I think you really have to go through this 6-0 sample for the Atlanta Falcons. And you have to say, what's going on in these games? And you really go through the games. You go back to week 1, you find a home divisional game against New Orleans. At that point in time, people didn't know what to make of New Orleans. Of course, Sean Payton had moved on, Jameis Winston, Dennis Allen, this, and that. New Orleans is not very good, if we're being perfectly honest, as was showcased on Thursday Night Football, getting hammered at an Arizona team who could not win at home until they found New Orleans in their home stadium. Come back to week 2, I faded Atlanta off that general idea in week 1 with the LA Rams. LA Rams go up 28-3 in the game and somehow do not cover the spread as Atlanta backdoors in egregious, epic, apocalyptic fashion to finish 31-27. Come back the following week on the road outside of the division on the West Coast. I suggested this might be a vacation. Something might be going on here. Nope. win at Seattle. Seattle may be more impressive than we think. That might be their most impressive ATS spot of the whole season. Come back home, we faded them again. Cleveland loss at Atlanta 23-20. Jacoby Brissett opened the game, 4 and out down deep, couple picks, just complete trash. Cleveland probably should have covered that game. And then, of course, the next week, another divisional game at Tom Brady, 21-15, down 21-0 in the game. A huge, huge backdoor. And finally, last week, San Francisco 49ers came in there in a real sandwich spot. San Francisco was on a road situation on the East Coast, off a blowout win the previous week. And, of course, a huge game this afternoon against the Chiefs. So every single one of those games has some sort of qualifier nature to it. Their road games have been largely qualified by egregious backdoors. I don't think it's going to come today. I think Joe Burrow and the boys are going to stand up in what is their only second out-of-division home game of the year. We did have the first one correctly, laying points against Miami a few weeks ago. Sign me up today. Cincinnati -6.5, 1 unit. North Florida stand up. Jacksonville Jaguars off a couple real lackluster efforts. A backdoor last week at the Colts. Previously, a very, very pathetic, disrespectful home divisional environment against the Texans. Jacksonville -3. Guns picks, unofficial.
Yeah, Alejandro just said it best. If you're watching this show right now, which 89 of you are on YouTube, you got to hit the like button. You got to hit the subscribe button. You got to spread the word of the sharpest show in the NFL and college football altogether. But I digress. Let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars here for a second. Now, you got New York Giants. They are a red-hot team right now. They're coming off a big home win, comeback with 6 minutes to go, beating Baltimore 24-20 despite losing the net yards battle -168 for the game. It's just irregular to see you win in that type of statistical element. Now, let's look at Jacksonville. Awful loss. They just got beat by their divisional opponent in a revenge spot, Indianapolis, 34-20, where Indianapolis scored a last-second touchdown for the cover, by the way. They could have just taken a field goal. Nope, we're going to throw a touchdown here. Jacksonville has lost 3 straight games overall. Now, this will be New York Giants' first true home game. I'm not counting the Atlanta game because that was a neutral site since week 1. When they faced the Tennessee Titans. So take that. They played so many home games back to back. Now they got to go and get motivated to go play in the hot heat of Florida. We'll see what happens there. But in looking at the offensive defensive yards per game for both teams, Jacksonville is actually ranked 8th in the league with a plus 32.8 yards per game average, where New York Giants are ranked 27th in the league, minus 71.4 yards per game average. I'm just talking about net yards overall. So Jacksonville really should have been winning these games in these 3 straight losses. They're winning the net yards battle, but they're just not getting the victories overall. Some of that kind of outliers like turnovers. Now Jacksonville wants to run the football. They can run the football well. 4.9 yards per carry on the ground, where the Giants struggle to stop the run. They give up 5.6 yards per carry, ranked 32nd in the league. So what you're going to be seeing here, in my opinion, there's a reason why Jacksonville is favored -3 here. I think the Giants team is running a little too hot. They're 5-1 against the spread so far this year, and they're going to meet a Jacksonville team with a chip on their shoulder coming off 3 straight losses by a touchdown or less. Jacksonville's favored here. There's a reason. Give me Jacksonville -3. My top play this week, 2 units.
Love that. And we're on Jacksonville -3 also in the competition. We see you guys in the chat. We're trying to build the YouTube channel as well here. Sammy Comer in the chat, what's up, brother? Jacks by 10 plus. I think you're speaking a very, very intelligent story. And of course, when you're really going through this game, you have to go to the Giants calendar, similar to what I just spoke about with the Falcons calendar. And you start to go down in the Giants calendar. I don't think anybody in any sort of sharp evaluation had the Giants 5-1 straight up and 2-0 on the road. But if you really start to go through these games, again, you have qualifier nature to what happened. Week 1, we did have the Giants correctly at +5.5 at Tennessee. We said that week, and we said it all preseason, the Giants are going to go in here and cover, mainly because Tennessee has a look-ahead game and has a Monday night game in Week 2 at Buffalo. And sure enough, Tennessee went up significantly in the game and gave it back late. And, of course, a late fourth-quarter touchdown for the Giants to win the game going away. But then you come back, sequence of home games, you found a London game. Giants again go down significantly to Aaron Rodgers and the boys, and backdoor again. And then, of course, last week, this hat, this team somehow, and this is, of course, why we're going this direction this week, can't close games, and the Giants just absolutely backdoored the Ravens in their home stadium. So the Giants are in a sequence of games here where they've just caught just epic backdoor environments, and it's going to be hard to sustain. And you go down to Jacksonville again. Jacksonville off a couple absolute duds in a row. Last week got backdoored. The previous week just laid down in the division of the Texans. For whatever reason, the Texans just seem to own them. Doesn't matter if it's Lovie Smith or whoever else. Just a weird situational dynamic within the division. This is not in the division. This is outside of the division. This is not a rivalry. This is your absolute dead zone spot for the New York Giants today. And this is definitely, if you really zoom out, I think this is very interesting to watch from the periphery. This is your classic Joes versus pros spot. The Joes are all over the Giants because they say, wow, a 5-2 team is getting points versus a 2-4 team. Hey, Vegas, how stupid are you? We're so smart. And of course, that side will win sometimes, but that's how basic the logic is. Casinos, sports books, Vegas algorithms are not giving away money for free. They're not paying for your Christmas presents with the Giants +3 unless something goes completely statistically awry. Guns picks, I agree. We're on it in the competition. Jacksonville -3. Staying within the same division, a divisional rivalry game, a revenge game. We're going down to Indiana, and you're looking at the Colts at a 2.5 figure, an official play.
Listen, I think the Colts' revenge tour of their divisional opponents continues here. They settled things up with Jacksonville last week, as I said before. Now they're going to want to settle things up with Tennessee here because this is the second time these two teams have met. Now let's look at Tennessee for a second. They've won 3 straight games off back-to-back road wins, including the Indianapolis 24-17 in their home stadium, Lucas Oil. Now, let's look at Indianapolis. They've won 2 straight games off dramatic win over Jacksonville in a revenge spot, 34-27. This is a revenge game, like I just stated, for Indianapolis, losing 24-17 at home, plus 122 net yards for that game. So they actually did dominate the yardage battle, but they just couldn't turn the game around. They were -3 in turnover ratio for Indianapolis. And if you actually go and look at the box scores and the drives, those interceptions, at least 2 of them, were turned into 2 touchdowns. That's 14-point swing there on 2 turnovers. So if you can control the turnovers for Indianapolis, I think they're going to be able to dominate in this game. Now you look at this matchup overall, 1-6 straight up and against the spread the home team is. Indianapolis 7-3 against the spread in the last 10 in Tennessee. And now Indianapolis is in a triple revenge spot here because they've lost to Tennessee 3 straight games. I don't think they repeat here. I'm going to be riding the dog, the away dog, in a revenge spot. Give me the Colts +2.5 as a 1-unit play.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. And actually, that's a 4x revenge game. I was just looking at this before. They have lost 4 straight to Tennessee. And of course, as we talk about with the Colts, different quarterbacks every year: Phillip Rivers, Andrew Luck, Carson Wentz, now Matt Ryan. But Matt Ryan seems to be finding some sort of edge here. And of course, the main narrative going forward, or in the past few weeks prior, was that this offense was just unable to move the football. Last week against a reasonably efficient Jacksonville defense, they did do that. And again, this is a situational buy where you do get value on the dog in a situation where in this divisional matchup, the line does not tell you a story. I always talk about line functionality in the division. It does not tell you here. If it's up and it's down, it does not matter. This is a motivation spot. I think you're onto something here. Next play. We're going to M&T Bank Stadium on a suddenly not so casual 7-point sharp Sunday, October 23rd, 2022. And the buy hat is engaged. And a lot going on in this game. And of course, that seems to be what I say every single time we have an official play, because if it's an official play, you better believe the numbers and the narratives are all over this environment. And this is a very similar spot to what I discussed with the Cincinnati side here. You find a Browns team coming in here looking to get demolished. And you have to go through the Browns schedule. And we had talked about this when the Browns started 2-2, and I suggested they probably should have been 4-0. But in that dispersion point, it could have gone 2 ways. They could have actually been better than we thought or worse than we thought. Because when you look at a Jets loss where they got backdoored by 2 touchdowns in the final 2 minutes of the game, stuff like that, and a really terrible loss at Atlanta, at that point in the calendar, I said, this team should be 4-0. The Jets aren't very good. Atlanta's not very good. excuse me, we got calls coming here, as I always say, on a beautiful Sunday morning. But when you really step back now, I think what you're looking at here is Cleveland is worse than people think. And you really start going through their calendar. The only potentially playoff caliber teams they've played, if we're going to be looking forward into January, are last week against New England. And New England did absolutely hammer them 38-15. The previous week, the Chargers covered or not covered, depending on the line, 30-28. Now you come on the road to Baltimore, and this is more so a situational buy on Baltimore. Baltimore is 0-2-1 ATS at home. Baltimore has melted off game after game. This melting process and sequence and consistency began with a egregious melt to Miami earlier on this year, and of course a melt to Buffalo as well. You get a revenge game, you get a line number. Last year, Baltimore, as we've discussed numerous times, was 8-3 and the number one seed in the AFC, and they cratered down the stretch, including a loss at Cleveland, and that was a plus 2.5. You're at a 6.5 now. Official play, 1 unit, Baltimore minus 6.5. Next play, Guns. We're going to Denver, and we got the Jets coming in here. Jets on a dub 3. Jets have a lot going on, a lot of upward movement. Obviously, Zach Wilson in this campaign moving up in his efficiency. Denver, Russell Wilson, as we've discussed numerous times, has not been very impressive in this particular window with Nathaniel Hackett. However, Russell Wilson is not playing this week. Brett Rippon, Boise State, nice win yesterday. Brett Rippon going to back it up today, Guns? Talk to me.
Listen, we're going to be riding with Broncos country, so let's ride. Let me tell you why. Listen, Denver is coming off three-game losing streak coming into this one after their primetime win over San Francisco, which was their last win. It seems like Denver's always playing in primetime these days, but on this game, not so much because they're playing the New York Jets. Now, New York Jets are playing a 3-game win streak so far since their home loss to the Cincinnati Bengals, 27-12. So they are cooking at all cylinders. Slate is taking receipts, and they're just moving at a higher rate that I think we need to be jumping off here. Now, key points with the New York Jets. There we go. I can spit it out. Last 3 weeks, they've played good defense, especially in the passing game and the run game. And they've basically been dominating with Breece Hall just taking up the ground game. But if you look at each game situation, defining occurrences in those versus Pitt, they had a QB change halfway through the game, putting in Kenny Pickett, a guy that has never taken a snap before in a regular season game. So there's a little bit of ring rust and trying to get a feel for the offense. So that kind of played a little bit in the success of the Jets in that game. Now you look at the Miami game, same type of situation. You had Teddy Bridgewater get knocked out of the game in the first quarter with a concussion. They had to go and put in a rookie quarterback in his first game, in his first snap, in the middle of a game, trying to get into that situation when you're not acclimated with the team. You're not going to be very successful. Now you look at the Green Bay situation. They come off Green Bay coming off a deflating loss in London, have to travel back, no rest, no bye week, trying to get acclimated back into the U.S. time zone, the Wisconsin time zone, and they just played absolutely flat versus the New York Giants. So 3 key situations kind of predicated why the Jets were successful. Now let's look at Denver's defense here. They've been their rock this year. They've been keeping this team in games. They hold their opponents to 300 yards or less in 5 out of their last 6 games. And they held their opponents to under 100 yards on the ground in 4 out of those 6 games. So when I'm talking about the Jets rushing game, I think they're going to have a difficult time doing it against this Denver team. Now, from what I'm seeing, I did check this morning, Denver QB Russell Wilson, game time decision. I don't know if he's out or not, but if he is, doesn't matter to me because I looked into Brett Rippon. If he starts for Denver, last time he started was 2020 versus the New York Jets. Ironically enough, on the road, and they beat them 37-28, even though Rippon threw 3 INTs in that game. They still won by 10. So now you have the Denver 5-1 straight up against the spread versus the New York Jets dating back to 2011. And the home team is 4-2 straight up and against the spread in that sample. Now, Denver coming off a Monday night primetime loss in OT versus a divisional opponent, deflating. but I think they're going to come in with a chip on the shoulder versus this New York Jets team that's flying highest of highs. And they're a non-division road win as a dog. Now back to on the road in high altitude, thin air, breathing heavy, hands on the knees, gassed out. I think this Denver team bounces back here. So I'm going to be rolling with the Denver Broncos as a pick, 1.5 unit play.
Yeah, and speaking of the inability to play at altitude, you go back to last year, early season in September, I believe it was September 26th, 2021. Zach Wilson in his rookie campaign did go to Denver and did play really, really lackluster pedestrian offensive football. A shutout, in fact, 26-0 Denver. So if you're going to cap the game in that direction, you're going to assume altitude and you're going to assume competitive nature and noise at Empower Field out there, this is definitely the spot for you. Coming back to 1 o'clock, a couple of non-officials, but we're going to the Circa Millions competition. And Alejandro had a great question. Said Jaguars is a guns pick, a Circa pick, but not official pick. Correct. The Circa Millions competition, you need 5 official picks. Of course, we buy in August every week. We don't necessarily bet all of them in our own bankroll in the Sunday to Sunday environment here. So I am not betting Jacksonville. Guns is on it, but we are on it in the Circa competition. The Circa competition, as I mentioned, staying course here, we're taking Detroit Lions at +7 against Dallas. This is an interesting environment. Of course, Dak Prescott comes back off a 5 or 6 week hiatus off an injury. A Dallas Cowboys team that did run off a 5-1 ATS sample with Central Michigan's finest, Cooper Rush. Go back to the only game that Dak Prescott did play this year. It was the opener against Tom Brady at home in prime time in week 1, a 19-3 loss. Not sure how much you can cross-reference that with the Lions. I think the situational buy here is more so just assuming the integration of Dak Prescott back into this locker room and this offense might not be so smooth, particularly when the team did play so well efficiently against the spread with Cooper Rush at quarterback. And you go to the Lions just in a small window. The Lions have been inconsistent this year. The Lions are far, far better and incredibly efficient, covering 90% of their home games in the last 15. On the road, they are more lackluster. They do come in here off a bye week and a blowout shutout loss at New England in the previous week. I think this will be a bounce back effect. And I think one final point on this, when you see the line here at 49.5, this is telling you points will be scored in this game. When Detroit did not play well on the road, they scored 0 points in the game. Detroit has a great offense with Jared Goff and some of these pieces. They do not have a good defense. So for this game to stay tight, they're going to have to score points. Dallas's defense is excellent. Their defensive front and their backing core are excellent. The fact this total is high speaks to the fact this will be a high back and forth game, which does function well for how Detroit will cover football games this season. Detroit +7, Circa Millions play. Guns picks, couple conversational points here. Let's go to Washington, D.C., FedEx Field, Landover, Maryland. Commanders come back home here, and Carson Wentz is not playing. And I think this is a theme this week on this card, where quarterbacks from previous generations, if you will, and of course we talk about this in pro sports all the time, previous generation could just mean 5 years. You know, this is not 80-year-old guys. And the generations come and go very, very quickly. But Russell Wilson not in the lineup might help the Broncos. Carson Wentz not in the lineup might help the Commanders. Taylor Heineke here, local product out of Old Dominion, hosting Aaron Rodgers and the boys. Guns picks. Any comments?
Yeah, this change could be refreshing. This is not a quarterback that is in his first start taking his first snaps. I mean, he's gone throughout virtually a whole season with this Washington Commanders team. So I think the offense should be comfortable with him in the lineup. Maybe even a better situation, in my opinion, because I haven't never been a Carson Wentz fan. I think he's a spread killer of all spread killers. And you got a Packers team that coming off a deflating loss against the Jets now, and it's back-to-back losses to New York teams. I don't know if this is going to be a pattern going through the season. I know Aaron Rodgers is not jiving with his receivers whatsoever. They're not on the same page as he is. I think he's missing Devontae Adams big time. And this is kind of one of those spots that, you know, you may have a little bit more highly motivated Commanders team here. The line's real short for this, and it's kind of telling here that it's probably It could be a 3-point game at the end of this one. And I don't know which direction it's going to go into, but that 4.5 is really telling to me. I mean, if I had to lean any direction on this one, I'd lead Commanders.
Yeah, and you guys know I've bought the Commanders week after week, just assuming upward movement. I do think Taylor Heineke could help this situation. And as you mentioned, this is not Aaron Rodgers from 5 years ago or even 2 years ago. Totally different group, totally different mentality. I mean, obviously noted in the offseason for going south, smoking a little ayahuasca or whatever. But, it's an environmental shift. He's dating Shailene Woodley, beautiful lady. I mean, this guy's got different priorities. And, I think after this long career, I mean, I don't know if people forget. I certainly forget sometimes that he is as old as he is because his quality of play has remained the same for, 17 years here, basically. But this team is definitely cratering. They're showing an inability to score the ball. And as you mentioned, without Devontae Adams, Alan Lazard has been solid, definitely not of Adams' quality. And one final point. Last year, these two teams did play in Green Bay. Green Bay did lay 8.5 points. This opened at 5.5. So just in terms of historical line averaging, when you're laying 8.5 at home and you open at 5.5 on the road, that's that 3 gap. That's not telling you a numerical story. And what it's telling you is it's going to be razor sharp. I do think the sharp movement has suggested Washington, of course, getting steamed down. That is not public action, I'll tell you that. Sharps on Washington, definitely the sharp side. We're not on this game. However, one additional 1 o'clock game that I don't think either of us have a real sharp look on, but let's discuss it for a maybe 60-second window here. Tom Brady on the road at the Panthers. Obviously, the Panthers here 1-5, just traded star running back McCaffrey to the West Coast in San Francisco. The coach came out in the media and said, we're not tanking. And, obviously, you play professional football, Leatherhead football, 53 men and top coaches within the planet Earth here. These guys are not going to say we're tanking. But in the locker room and in the front office, I think they're tanking. Guns, you get the Bucs coming in here really lackluster in the campaign, 3-3. Tom Brady talking about all sorts of stuff. The personnel really is lackluster from the standpoint of the offensive line just not protecting whatsoever. Any comments here at -13? This is definitely this is tough stuff in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a tough line. I mean, I don't know if I really trust Tom Brady in the offense to get over the 13, even though we do know what's going on with the Carolina Panthers. They're resetting, they're rebooting, they're refreshing everything. They're trading away their top offensive production to the 49ers and just gathering draft picks as collateral. So when they do make a move, they're probably going to make some big splashes in the draft this year. Feels like a tank. I don't know if the players are even going to step up and play in this game. The line is kind of telling the story that this should be a full-blown blowout by the Bucs. But like I said, I have not seen the Bucs really blow out anybody this year. Tom Brady seems unmotivated, seems distracted, doesn't seem like his competitive self. He's getting frustrated on the sidelines. He may be getting frustrated with the coaching. Hell, he might be getting frustrated from his receivers as well. I'm not sure what the dynamic is there, but it's really not positive in my opinion. So you just have two completely unmotivated teams in my opinion, and this is just a game that I have no interest to even bet or lean, nothing. I'm just going to pass on it.
Yeah, and obviously we talk about this on a regular basis. Some games just purely have no exploitability. And when you just look at the numbers of this game, when you see a line at 13 and a half, and you see a total at 39, they're telling you a story that's a combined story between the total and the line. This game is not going to have a lot of points. And if one team's laying 2 touchdowns, they're telling you Carolina's not going to score a lot of points. But to get that margin within such a small amount of expected points in the game is really, really sharp stuff. I mean, this game is probably going to end up somewhere around like 27-10 or like 27-13 or something right around there. Definitely a gamble spot, not what we're trying to look at. Let's go 4 o'clock. Let's go to Vegas, Allegiant Stadium. The Raiders come back here just in an egregious environment. 1-4 on the campaign. Josh McDaniels, campaign 1. This is not how he pictured it beginning. And a lot of just, brutal losses. I mean, this team's coming in here 1-4. Guns, 24-19, 5-point loss, overtime loss to Arizona, 2-point loss to Tennessee, and of course, most recently a cover on Monday Night Football going back a week and a half at divisional rival Kansas City. Houston comes in here. Upstart, Lovie Smith, campaign 1. Guns, picks, comments, please.
Yeah, I mean, both teams coming off a bye week. I think the Las Vegas Raiders here seem like the play here. It almost made my card. Seeing the line here at 6.5, moving to 7, and then you have a Houston team. You just look at they get beat and they get crushed in the net yards battle in every single one of their contests. They're coming off a high end road divisional win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. That played absolutely terrible in that game. Even in the net yards, they lost that one too. So, I mean, with this Houston team, they're not that good. I think they had a huge covering streak for a while that kind of dated back to last year. And I think there's a point where the cookie's going to crumble for them as far as the covering is concerned. I think this is going to be a Raiders full-blown blowout. I mean, when you just look at what the Raiders defense does well versus what the Texans like to do offensively, I don't know how they're going to get past this Raiders defense at all and even put up any points. So if there's any take on this one, I'd probably take the Raiders.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I think if you go down their calendar just briefly, as you mentioned, they've covered a lot of games. They've had, I don't know, it's just been a lot of inconsistencies. But if you go back to one specific environment, week 2 at Denver, their only road environment at the AFC West, they did cover that game. And it was really just a disgusting effort by Russell Wilson and the boys on offense. It was 16-9, and Denver was laying 10 points. So I think if you really look at that game and you cross it with this, first of all, that was a 7-point game. This is a 7-point line. This could be sharp. But I do think something that we had discussed when we took that game incorrectly, I did have Denver that day and did lose the wager. Davis Mills on the road outside of the division has been unable to score points sustainably in this entire window as he's been the starter for the Texans. And that game was no different. 9 total points. Houston did not cover that game because they played great football. The only reason they covered that game is because Denver was just so terrible offensively. The Las Vegas Raiders are not so terrible offensively. Las Vegas can put up points on you, and they can put up points on you quickly. And I think, as you mentioned, this is a funky travel spot, and it's also a sandwich spot for the Texans. Texans off a bye and an outright win as a dog at Jacksonville inside of the division. Next week, they come home against Tennessee inside of the division. And this is important stuff. We talk about this on a regular basis, but divisional rivalry football stands far above out-of-division games that there's no real history behind the matchup. This qualifies. Derek Carr and the boys have absolutely no rivalry against the Houston Texans. So you get a big win at Jacksonville. You got to look ahead to another divisional game. You got to go out to Vegas. And again, this is a Vegas team that has lost 4 one-possession games. This should come up not only in their win rate, but their ATS efficiency. Not officially on this, but significant lean to Las Vegas here. Next game, and then we'll go to the next official. Staying out west at 4 o'clock here, you find the Seahawks coming into LA, SoFi Stadium, of course, shared between the Rams and the Chargers out there. Chargers -5. Guns pick. Seahawks come in here, honestly, taking on a bit of a bye environment. I think this team is hard to figure out. A lot of the speculation in the media is that Geno Smith might get a long-term contract, which I think might be a bit of a reach from a media narrative perspective. But Geno Smith has been a lot better than people assume. Guns, any comments on this game?
Who knew that Geno Smith was going to be a more productive quarterback than Russell Wilson this year? I mean, it's kind of a shock, and he's really comfortable with this offense. I think this is kind of one of the staples of this Seahawks team is if they're going to be successful, they're going to have to move the ball down the field, and they're going to have to score points. Their defense isn't as good as their offense is. Then you look at the Chargers. What do the Chargers not do well? And that's stopping the run. I mean, so I think this Seattle team can run the ball, and then they can utilize that in their passing game with play action and what have you. So, the Chargers coming off an OT win in prime time, short rest, to play the Seahawks team at home. I don't know. I was high on the Chargers this year, but it seems to me that ever since that injury happened to Herbert, they haven't been the same really. And I really continue to question his health as far as his ribs are concerned. I can't imagine every time he throws that ball that he's like, oh yeah, I feel no pain. No, I'm sure he does. But next got to be distracting trying to get your accuracy down. So if there's a lean that I had on this one, I probably take the Seahawks. I just think they can at least stay with the Chargers and make it a close game. Do think the Chargers will pull this one out. I just don't know if they're going to pull it out by 5 points, maybe more like 3.
Yeah, and you mentioned Justin Herbert getting hurt in that game in Week 2 at Kansas City on a primetime game. Since then, as you mentioned, this team has not looked particularly good, and they're somehow 3-1 straight up in that window. But again, it's very crucial to look at how and why they're 3-1 straight up. Outright win at Houston. That was actually a revenge game. Houston had gotten them last year in an out of division game. They came in there, they were pissed off. They went way up in the game, gave it back, and did cover late. Then another road game at Cleveland, who we just discussed, is not very good. And then last week, Denver. So 3 wins: Houston, Cleveland, Denver. And the only game in that sequence, which was an out-of-division home game, an outright blowout loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars in Week 3, 38-10. So now you get an environment where it seems that Seattle functions well. If we can cross-reference this game with getting 4.5, 5 points at Detroit in an outright win, I have a significant lean here to Seattle. I think Seattle shows upward movement, and as you mentioned, and we just discussed, I think Justin Herbert is more hurt than people think here. Final play of the card, 4:25 p.m., premier primetime, if you will, special, a Super Bowl revenge game dating back to February of 2020. The world was in a vastly different place then, and I will not elaborate further. Needless to say, Hard Rock Stadium at that point in time, a very, very tight game, a game that the Niners gave back in the fourth quarter to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in their only Super Bowl win. 4:25, Levi Stadium. 49ers come home here off an abysmal look-ahead loss on the East Coast, back-to-back games at the NFC South. Chiefs opened up at -3, getting steamed down. Guns picks, an official.
Yeah, I'm going to be riding with the 49ers here. Let me tell you why. Listen, KC coming off a tough loss to Buffalo, 24-20, minus 56 net yards for that game. So, the score actually kind of aligned with the net yards in that one. Now you got San Francisco off an even tougher loss on the road to Atlanta, losing 28-14. But they were missing a lot of key players on the defensive side for this one that they should be getting back this week, including Nick Bosa. Now we got San Francisco defense is stout. They're actually having a great year. They only give up 256 yards per game, 3.3 rushing yards per carry, and they have a 12.4% sack rate. So they can put some pressure on the quarterback. They can stop the run, and they can obviously hold you into a spot where you're not going to really produce offensively. Now, Casey's weak point, if you actually just check their defense, that it's their defense, especially in the passing game. They give up 266 yards per game passing, and they only have a 5.7% sack rate. So they're not only not getting pressure on the quarterback, they're also allowing a ton of yards to their competition. Now, San Francisco coming back home. They were on the East Coast for 2 weeks. They had to go play Carolina, and then they lost to Atlanta. So getting back home is a little bit more refreshing. They should be pumped up for this one, as this one is the NFL game of the week. Home team in this situation, when these teams meet, 6-0 straight up and 5-1 against the spread. And also the Niners are 6-0 against the spread versus a team with a winning record. So take those with a grain of salt. They're just trends. But I think this is going to be a good spot for San Francisco to get right after a deflating loss versus the ever so covering Atlanta Falcons last week. I'm going to be taking the dog here. San Francisco at home +1 as a 1.5 unit play.
Yeah, a lot going on in this game, and of course, you could, in my opinion, you can make an angle for both sides. I mean, you look at Kansas City. Kansas City is 2-0 ATS as a road short favorite at the NFC early on in the campaign at Arizona. Of course, we talked about this. Arizona ineffective at home, probably more so on Arizona being awful than Kansas City just being so amazing, but maybe not, because Kansas City did also hammer Tom Brady and the boys. But if we really sequence this sequence of revenge angles as they all interconnect, if you will, you had Patrick Mahomes go to Tom Brady and revenge him in a Super Bowl environment. Then you had Josh Allen come into Kansas City and revenge Patrick Mahomes from a second round obscene 42-36 loss. Now you go on the road and you get Jimmy Garoppolo and the Niners in a revenge angle against Kansas City. And again, we talked about sharp steam. I rarely ever look at steam in bets. You guys know this very well. I look at numbers and narrative. I look at Vegas algorithms, movement in terms of their line, and I look at the situational, psychological environment of the sport, the team, and the individuals. But in the NFL, where there's one game a week and there's just so much action on these games, sharps do move lines, and they usually have a very good tail behind the line. This line is moving aggressively towards San Francisco. 2 points of movement, particularly in a big-time game like this, where theoretically there's going to be a lot of action on both sides. You usually see more significant movement in like backwoods college basketball games where sharps just steam the hell out of one side and moves like 5.5, 6 points. If you see 2 points of movement in a game that's basically the effective Super Bowl of this week, week 7, that's telling you a big story. Sharps are heavy on San Francisco here. And San Francisco at home this year has been highly impressive. 2 blowout wins, 27-7 against Seattle. As we mentioned, Seattle probably better than we originally thought. And of course, hammering the Rams 24-9 in a primetime special, which we had correctly going back a few weeks. I couldn't talk you off San Francisco. I do worry Kansas City off a loss, but one final point here. The loss last week wasn't so bad. Buffalo was supposed to win that game. It was the first time that Patrick Mahomes had been an underdog in his home stadium in his career. Books were telling you a story. So Kansas City didn't underachieve in that game. They played to the expected average. Who didn't play to the expected average? San Francisco. San Francisco got absolutely demolished at Atlanta. Clearly a look-ahead spot. I think San Francisco is a sharp look. I'm not on it officially. 8:20 p.m., we had discussed this, and this is where I think the league really needs to make a flex point for these games. I know they have a flex later in the year for Sunday Night Football, but why not do it from week 1? Because sometimes these games just are lacking in quality. And speaking of lacking in quality, we got the Dolphins hosting the Steelers. And I think, you're going to get some views in this game. It is the only game on the slate at that point in time. There's a big national following for Steelers Nation. I know that. And Miami does get a bit of a pull, obviously, to Tagovailoa, as I'm working on that pronunciation. I think coming back this week. Guns picks. Any comments on this one, my guy?
I mean, you got Tua coming back from an egregious injury. He could have played last week, but they decided not to and go with the rookie. So he is coming back for this game. So there could be a gathering kumbaya type moment for the Miami Dolphins here. They're playing the Steelers team. Actually coming off a pretty impressive win versus the lackluster Buccaneers last week. So maybe living the highs of highs going into this game, playing up at Miami. That probably wants to kind of bounce back themselves. They haven't been the same without Tua, and maybe getting them back in the lineup will be a refreshing thing for the offense, and that can carry over in the defense if you're actually putting up some offensive production. So if I had the line here is at -7 right now. I have no real lean on this one because it is kind of getting to that point where, if it gets past the 7, I just don't like to bet it. I like to keep it in between the 3s and the 7s. But if I had a lean on this one, maybe Miami first half would be a lean on this one. Maybe a little bit of comeback home and prime time, want to show out for McDaniel. Maybe that's the direction I would go with that one.
Yeah, and our 5th official play in the Circa competition is Miami -7. And, of course, that is Old Man Who Bets, the great Fusini, the odds fellow, who will be back on here next week with us in our 3-way show here, and myself. And we're on Miami -7. And, what we're looking at here purely is Miami coming off a 3-game losing streak, 0-3 ATS last 3. Obviously, no Tua dating back to that primetime Thursday game at Cincinnati. That game was a 27-15 loss, non-cover, which we had correctly that week. And then they went into New York Jets. Jets had a generational divisional revenge element going there. Jets hammered them 40-17. And then last week, Minnesota, which I did suggest would probably be the Joe Public short cover of the week, did cover a -3 in Miami, 24-16. So you get a team that did not function very well without their starting quarterback. This is the polar opposite of what you saw with the Dallas Cowboys. So within this competition, you see what we're doing here. Dallas functioned incredibly well with a backup quarterback. Now they get Dak back. Theoretically, that should be disruption. So we're taking Detroit. Miami did not function well without their quarterback. So him coming back theoretically should be an aid point to improve. So we're taking Miami. And as you mentioned, Pittsburgh off a huge win, huge home win. And the only real corollary point here that we can use, maybe not great because, of course, Buffalo is the class of the entire sport, but Kenny Pickett only road game in his career outside of the division, maybe not coincidentally, at the AFC East, an absolute hammer zone blowout loss. And I think tonight -7 is the sharp look in this game. That's going to wrap it up. It is NFL Week 7. It is Circa Millions, the show. It is the Shark and the Gun, Sunday, October 23rd, 2022. My top 2 official plays. The buy hat is engaged. Lamar Jackson, enough is enough. Stand the hell up. M&T Bank Stadium, Baltimore, Maryland. Let's fucking go. Staying in the same division, another home favorite. Cincinnati Bengals catching the 6-0 ATS Falcons. It has to end somewhere. I think it starts here today. The other 3 Circa plays, as discussed, Detroit +7, Jacksonville -3, Miami -7. Guns picks, top 5 plays, Jacksonville -3, Cincinnati -6.5, Indy +2.5, Denver, Pick'em, and San Francisco in the Super Bowl rematch at +1, 4:25 p.m. Levi's Stadium out in the Bay Area. It is Jaguars Nation. 9 words, a lifestyle ride the way we got to war. We appreciate you guys watching this show. We know there's 10,000 NFL shows. We will have Oddsfellow back on here next Sunday, the 3-way. We appreciate you guys beyond any words we can put on the screen and discuss. Guns picks, close them out with some words, and let's fucking dominate.
Man, you guys showed up today in the chat. Thanks for everybody that put out their input. I've been putting them up as the show goes along. We had over 100 people watching on YouTube, so I ensure all of you hit the thumbs up button and hit the likes and hit the subscribe button to the Dad Bod's YouTube channel, because that keeps us in the algorithm. That spreads the word. We are the sharpest show on the planet. Please spread it to everybody and anyone that wants our content. So thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you next time, Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the College Football Show, and always 10 a.m. Between 10 a.m. 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Circa Millions Show. Until next time, let's keep cashing, let's make some money, and as always, let's keep dancing.